end of the fifth reading of Parshas Chayei, Rivka comes home. The Torah describes in details after Rivka sent off, and she rides on the camels. The man Eliezer is taking her. Yitzchak is coming from the Be'er Chayei, and he goes Lasuach Basada. Rashi tells us that Lasuach is L'shen Tefillah. This alludes to Mincha, and Yitzchak is the one who established Mincha for everybody. Other Mefarshim say he just went out to take a walk and be contemplative. Like Ravam says, Yatzel Hizbaidid, and to meditate, to be contemplative, think about Avodas Hashem. At any rate, there he is, strolling in the meadow, in the field. Vatisa Rivka Eseineha. In verse 64, Rivka raises her eyes, Vateres Yitzchak, and she sees Yitzchak, and she's struck or overly impressed, and she dismounts from the camel. Vatemer ala Eved, she said, "Who is that person?" And he says, "This is the man." Vayemer Eved, Hu Adoni, he is the master, my master. Vatikach Hatzoy Vatiskos, and Rivka veils herself. And this is one of the sources of the idea that a bride veils herself, because the first time we hear of a Jewish chasna and kala meeting each other, so Rivka veils herself. And there are many messages that are encoded here. Amongst them is that the notion of marriage is not about superficial charisma, but rather about the qualities that a person possesses. At any rate, Vayisaper ha'eved liYitzchak is kol advarim asher asa. So now Eliezer tells Yitzchak all the things that he did. What does he tell him? Let's take a look at Rashi. Vayisaper ha'eved, the servant, meaning Eliezer, tells Yitzchak, Gila Loi Hanisim Shanasulei. What would be the point of Yitzchak being told everything Eliezer did, what all of Eliezer's machinations, how he cleverly manipulated things? Like, what would be the point of that? It's just like showing off. So Rashi says it can't be that he's telling him the details, the irrelevant details now. He's a young lady here. He's going to go now. We're having a powwow and tell him what he did, his heroism, his intuition, his quick thinking. So Rashi says, therefore, it has to be something which is relevant for now. It has to make a compelling case for Yitzchak to say, yes, this is the one, this is the right one. So therefore he tells him about miracles. He reveals to him the miracles that happened. What were the miracles? We learned yesterday. Kafza Aloi had haaretz, that the earth sprang forth. And he got there in one day. And then the second thing which was extraordinary, as we learned 2 days ago, is Nizdam Nalei Rivka B'tfilasai, that Rivka appeared, or she was available, and he's in the middle of davening still. It's B'tfilasai. He didn't even finish davening. And already Rivka appeared, and it was exactly as he had asked for. So the point, of course, is explaining or making the case to Yitzchak that this is the one. Does Yitzchak buy it? Well, Yitzchak ha'ela. He takes her into the tent of Sarah Imai. As Rashi explained earlier in the Parsha, when it came to Rivka running to her mother, that at that time, women and men didn't necessarily live always in the same tent. If you had tents, if you had like these temporary dwellings, there was a woman's tent and a men's tent, and maybe a common tent. Anyway, he takes her into the private area where Sarah used to live. Vayikach es Rivka, and then he marries Rivka. V'atehi lo leisha, she becomes for him a wife. Vaye'evaheha, and he loves her. Vayinochem Yitzchak achrei imay, and Yitzchak finds comfort after his mother. So there's a lot of living packed into this one little verse. Obviously, it didn't just happen just like that. Like he took her in a tent and he married her and he loved her and everything was. So what happened here? What's going on? So Rashi tells us the following: Ha'oyala Sarah imay, vayivieha ha'oyala. That it doesn't just mean that he took her into the tent, so to speak, but rather ha'oyala Sarah imay should be understood or read as that he brought her into this living quarters. V'harei he Sarah imay, and he saw that she's just like Sarah. Kiloimar, in other words, naaseis dugmas Sarah imay. What he saw here was a paradigm of his mother Sarah. How could that be? Sarah was 127 years old, and Rivka is 3 years old. What do you mean he saw a paradigm of Sarah? Sarah, this was her home. This was where she lived. And Rivka's a young girl, a mature girl, maybe like a teenager, but still, like a, a very young person. What do you mean? He saw she was Sarah. Sarah was Megayeres HaNashim. Sarah was the one who was bringing these women to monotheism and bringing them closer to Yiddishkeit, and she taught, and she was an influence. What did he see? There's like a piece missing here. So Rashi says, Kolzman, Shekolzman Shasara Kayemes, as long as Sarah was alive. So in this tent, there were three things that were extraordinary. Number one, Haya Ner Daluk, there was a lamp burning, Me'erev Shabbos, Le'erev Shabbos, from Friday to Friday. From the day before Shabbat till the day before Shabbat, or eve of Shabbat, the lamp continuously burnt. So obviously that's miraculous. And the second thing is that bracha mitsuya ba'isa, that regardless of how much or how little food Sarah made, somehow there was always enough to go around. There was something about the dough, so to speak. There was something about the food that Sarah made that it was blessed. Somehow everything went right. It went better. And last, anon kosher al ha'oil. There was this presence. It's a cloud, so I guess a cloud or some mist. But this was a paradigm or a representation of Hashem's presence that somehow hugged this tent. Umisha Mesa. And when Sarah passed, so that cloud dissipated, the lamps went dark, and there was no bracha mitzuya b'isa. I'm sure they ate, but the food wasn't the same. Something wasn't right. And then, Ucheshaba Rivka, when Rivka arrived, and she takes up residence in this very same area, so then these miracles returned. And as such, Yitzchak now knew, in addition to the amazing things that Eliezer told him, when he saw that Rivka has the same impact as Sarah has, and that the same miraculous and supernatural events are being engendered by her presence, so then he understood that she is the one. So we read, Batahil Isha. At that point, when he knows that she's the one, Yitzchak marries her. I got tongue twister. And he loves her. And Yitzchak acharei imay. So what does it mean, acharei imay, after his mother? Rashi says, derech eretz, the way of the world, it's just the way things are. That calls man she'imay shel adam chayemes, as long as a man's mother is alive, kadochu etzla, he remains connected to her. At least that's the normal way things are. Umisha mesa, but when she passes, hu misnachem be'ishtei, he finds comfort in his wife. In other words, there's a strong influence of a feminine presence. The first feminine influence on a man is his mother. And that is a very strong influence. And that influence, when that influence is no longer there, that presence is no longer there, then he seeks that same kind of reassuring feminine presence in his wife. Yitzchak found that kind of comfort, or found that sense of security in his mother's presence. And when his mother was no longer there, he was missing it. And he found it again in Rivka. Now, obviously, Rivka was much younger than him, and she couldn't defend him. What exactly does it mean? That there's something about there's a feminine dynamic that was missing in Yitzchak's life. It was his mother, and later on it became Rivka. That's the way the Torah ends the story of Yitzchak and Rivka. It's not very dramatic. It's not very romantic. It's a story of a servant with camels, for whom miracles happen, and he meets her. And in one verse, like a lot happens, and that's the end of the story. And it's Vehine. He sees it's Sarah, it's his mother, and that's it. He marries her. So the Imrei Shafar says something very interesting. He says that the truth is that once Sarah passed on, Rivka was born, and Yitzchak understood on a spiritual level that whatever influence Sarah was going to have, now Rivka was that individual. But Rashi can't really use that terminology, because Rashi has to explain it pshuta shel mikra. It's got to be understood in a literal way.
Rabbi, how old was Sarah when Abraham married her?
Very young.
Same idea.
They were both children, though. I mean, what you would call today children. People, it seems, matured much more quickly in antiquity. I'm not talking about 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about 4,000 years ago, or 37 or 36 centuries ago. So really, this idea of the three things that he saw, Vayinochem Yitzchak Achrei Imeh, the Zohar says that it's not just a sign that she was the one. The Zohar says that that's why Yitzchak found comfort. The Zohar doesn't just see this as a feminine presence. The Zohar says that Yitzchak found comfort in knowing that the miracles would continue. When he saw that Sarah Imenu had this influence, Ner Dalok and Bracha Mitzuya, the lamps were burning, the blessing was found in the bread, the presence of Hashem was there, that was something that Yitzchak felt bereft by. When Rivka brought that back, that's what he was comforted by. He was comforted by the notion that the spiritual influence of Sarah had not disappeared, but had simply passed on from Sarah now to Rivka. Radak says on a literal level, there was the goodness of Sarah was something that Yitzchak found extremely refreshing. It's something that was like almost inspirational for Yitzchak. And when Rivka came, and Rivka had that same goodness about her. So this also brought him, that's why it brought him comfort. That was the Vayinochem Acharei Sarah Imei. So the bottom line was, how did Yitzchak know this is the one? There was no love at first sight, necessarily. This was not what you would call the typical love story. How did he know? He knew because he saw the kind of circle of influence that she was able to engender around her. That's what he saw. So what can this teach us? What can this very unusual description of marriage teach us in our modern day and era? What does it tell us? If you would describe a marriage in these terms today, it probably would not fly. But it's the Torah. The Torah has to be eternal. So what does it teach us? So I'm going to direct you to page Reish Tzadik Daled in the Biurim. And here, the Rebbe, Reish Tzadik Daled. It's Siman Lamed Ches, the 30th entry in Parshas Chayei. Here, the Rebbe analyzes this in a way which can give us clarity even in today's day and age, even though these are descriptions of a different time and a different era. So the Rebbe's analysis begins with almost like a question. The halacha is, and this is found clearly in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Reish Samach Gimel, in the Shulchan Aruch chapter 263. It's very clear over there. Ima isha eini madlika neiras Shabbos, mikol siba shehi. If a woman doesn't light Shabbat candles for any reason, she's not there, she's not well, she doesn't want to, for whatever reason, it could be such a thing. Woman doesn't light Shabbos candles. So who has to light Shabbos candles? The husband. I mean, the Shabbos candles have to be lit. So ideally, the woman would do it. If the woman's not available, the husband would do it. So the Rebbe says, Avram, he fulfilled all the mitzvahs, didn't he? We see Avram Kiyem is kol mitzvahs. So he fulfilled all the mitzvahs. That would also mean Gam mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, even rabbinic mitzvahs. And the mitzvah of Hadlakas Neder Shabbos Kodesh, lighting Shabbat candles, is a rabbinic mitzvah. So bevadai hayamadlik is Neder Shabbos batzmei. There's no doubt that Yitzchak Avinu or Avram Avinu, somebody was lighting candles. Say it was Avram. He was the master of the household. Sarah wasn't there. Who was lighting candles? Avram Avinu was lighting candles.
But you said it was rabbinic.
Yeah.
So
Avram did all the mitzvahs, even the rabbinic mitzvahs. The Torah wasn't given yet. Avram even, it says, did the Eruvim which were only instituted during the first temple era by Shlomo HaMelech. Even Erev Tafshilin, which is be careful about Yom Tov.
the shaking of the lulav and esrog too.
For sure, he did shaking of lulav and esrog. It could have been a little bit different than when we do mitzvahs today, but he did things in the image of these mitzvahs. And here we have a business of Shabbat candles being lit. Okay, if Shabbat lamps are being lit, then if Sarah was lighting Shabbat lamps, then in her absence, Avram Avinu would have been lighting Shabbat lamps. No question about it. V'yafal pikein, and nonetheless, Hanedis shehidlik Avram loy dalku me'erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos. Here's Avram, is a tzaddik. He's been serving Hashem with utter extreme devotion for the last 145 years or 44 years. He's 147 now. And we say that Avram Avinu's lamps did not burn miraculously from one Friday evening to the next. And how do we know that? Because it says, Rashi says clearly, Misha Mesha Pasku. Once Sarah passed, that's it. It stopped. The Dafke Benedis Shehedliko Rivka. And specifically when Rivka comes and she lights Shabbat candles, Shoisaz Yalda Ketana Bas Shalish is a young girl. very mature. She's got her stuff together. She's not like today's 3-year-old. She's like a girl who's 20 years old. Fine. But she's still a very young person. And she was living amongst very wicked people. And she never heard of Shabbat candles before, we would have to imagine. How would she have known of Shabbat candles growing up in Besul's house with a brother like Lavan? Her mother wasn't lighting Shabbat candles. So she comes now, she learns about these things, and she says, I want to do this. Okay. She lights Shabbat candles. Obviously, you have to understand, this pasuk doesn't mean that it was Friday afternoon when they met. And they met Friday afternoon, and Rivka came home and said, oh, it's Friday afternoon. What do we do on Friday afternoon? And Yitzchak said, we light Shabbat candles. Rivka said, really? Okay, show me what to do. And boom. Obviously, this verse is compacting weeks or months, clearly. So at some point, Rivka learns about Shabbos, and she hears about Shabbos candles. And then she starts lighting Shabbos candles. And Yitzchak doesn't marry her right away. It wasn't like he met her and married her within 5 minutes. So at some point, Rivka learns about this and understands it. And all along, Avram has been lighting Shabbos candles, and nothing happens. And then Rivka lights Shabbos candles, and all of a sudden, it's a Nes Mufla, it's an incredible miracle, that the candles are burning miraculously from 7 days long, from Erev Shabbos to Erev Shabbos. It's like a Hanukkah miracle, except nobody ever talks about it. For years and years and years, these candles would burn. These lamps would burn for a week. So how does that work? Avraham Avinu wasn't good enough? Avraham Avinu's candles didn't make a difference. His Shabbos candles would burn out in a natural way, but Rivka, a little girl, she had this amazing miracle. She had the ability to illuminate the home or the environment, and miraculously would burn for 7 days. So the Rebbe says, clearly there has to be some kind of reason. There's something unique about Rivka lighting candles versus Avram lighting candles. It can't be Rivka's personality or Rivka's righteousness in comparison to Avram righteousness. Like Sarah was so much more righteous than Avram, so her candles would burn, but Avram didn't merit this miracle. And then Rivka was so much more righteous than Avram. The moment she lit the candles, she has the miracles and the merits. Like that, clearly that's not the case here. So how do we explain the fact that it was only with Sarah, and then this legacy, if you will, is passed on to Rivka, but Avram's Shabbos candles don't function that way? So the Rebbe suggests that this has something to do with the difference between the genders, which Torah believes that there is a difference, that there's male and there's female, and they have unique paths in Avodas Hashem, unique neshamas, and unique abilities. Tafkida shal ha'ish, the purpose, the job, the mission, if you will, generally speaking, of the masculine gender is laseg b'inyanim shemechutz lebeisei, that he's involved in things outside the home. Ve'ilu tafkida shal ha'isha, the primary function or the area of excellence of a Jewish woman is in Yonei Abayas Atzmai, is the home itself. So it doesn't mean that there aren't women who are or were breadwinners. It doesn't mean that there aren't men who had the ability to set the tone in the home, but generally speaking, that was a feminine thing. The tone in the home will be set by the mother of the home. And the way we deal with the outside world is something that is more to do with the masculine gender, or the father in the home. As the David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Psalm 45, Kol kavuda bas melech penima, that the real honor, the real glory, the real dignity of the daughter of the king is inward, not outward. So it is the woman's purview, lahachshiram uletaknam, to ensure that the environment in the home is the way it should be, and to fix and make it so. Ukedivri Chazal. Here the Rebbe is going to bring now a teaching of our sages from the Gemara Masechtas Yevamis. I'm pretty sure we invoked this a few days ago. But this Gemara Masechtas Yevamis on page Samach Gimel states a fact of the way things once were, but we understand that this notion of the way things once were, where the man was the hunter and the woman was grinding or the flour or the wheat in creating out of the raw material the finer things in life, that this is as much a paradigm and a metaphor as it's literal. And what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says, "Ish mevi esachitim," that the man brings the wheat min hasada habaysa. He brings it from the field. He brings it into the home. Ulam. Misha mechen esachitim. Who prepares wheat? Who fixes the wheat, if you will? Bepoil, factually, actually, la'achila. There's wheat, which we would call raw materials, and then there's bread, which is perfected material. You took the raw material and wheat turned into a loaf of bread. So he ha'isha, the Gemara says, that's the woman. It says, ha'adam mevi chitim, The man brings wheat. Klum Adam Chitim Kaises. What do you chew wheat? Do you eat raw materials? So that's how the Gemara, that's the paradigm the Gemara uses to describe the difference between the masculine gender and the feminine gender, and the interaction between the two, and how a home or a family is sustained between husband and wife. This, the Rebbe suggests, is the deeper reason. That's why it's the woman's purview to light the Shabbat candles, not the man's purview. And it's not up for grabs. Every family should decide who should light the candles. No, there's a big emphasis. We say specifically the Jewish mothers and daughters, they're the ones who light the candles. And the literal reason that's brought in Shulchan Aruch is, quote, Mipnei shemitzuyas bebayis va'oskes b'tzarchei habayis, because they are in the home and they're involved with homemaking or creating the home environment. But on a deeper level, that means in whose hands we're vested, for who is given the power to be able to create the magic and majesty of a Jewish home. And the answer is Neshei B'nai Yisrael, specifically Jewish women. And we see this with Sarah and we see this with Rivka. V'lachein dafka l'Sarah u'lerivka. Only for Sarah and Rivka, and the Rebbe maintains that me'einzeh beruchnius, and the spiritual level, the same is true l'chol isha u'bas Yehudiya. For every Jewish mother and daughter, the same is true. Shetafkidon, that their primary function is lasik b'tzarchei habayis, is to ensure that the home is the way the home should be. Dafka. Lahen dafke, specifically to them, nitan hakoyach lahoyeres habayis b'ner mitzvah. They were given the ability to create the environment of a home that's illuminated with the light and energy and beauty of what's called mitzvahs, connection to Hashem. Kach she'or ner Shabbos, so that the lamps or the light of the Shabbos candles, yashpia me'oirei, are able to influence and spill its illumination al habayis, on the home, not only on Friday night, but in fact, b'meshech kol hashavua kulei, all week long. So did Avraham Avinu light Shabbat candles? He lit Shabbat candles. Did Friday night look like Friday night? Of course it looked like Friday night. There's a Jewish home, it looked like Friday night. But how did the Friday night influence the whole week? How did those candles literally, let's say, but also proverbially, burn all week long? And the answer is, because that was the unique purview of Sarah Imenu. And even though Avram was a wonderful person and a big tzaddik and all those things, but ultimately it was specifically Rivka who was able to do this. And when Yitzchak sees this, he says, so this is Sarah Imai. This is a Jewish woman. This is the image of my mother, and that's why he loves her, he marries her, he finds comfort in her, and that's how he knows she's the one.
So in a practical way, the husband is, what's his responsibility?
What's his responsibility? The husband is supposed to be a provider, in a practical way.
Provider.
He's supposed to be a provider. He's supposed to bring the raw materials.
In a spiritual way too?
This is a loaded subject, but in some way, yes. In some way, yes. Let me say this: the Jewish people has survived through thick and thin, through trial and travail, not because of the shul, and not because of the rabbi, and not because of the yeshiva. The Jewish people have prevailed and survived because of the Jewish home. The most well-attended religious event in the Jewish calendar is not Kol Nidre, it's the Seder. And Pesach, which represents the foundation of Judaism, is in the home, not in the shul. And that is the contribution of the Jewish woman. Without Jewish women, there'll be no Judaism. The shul is important. The rabbi has a job to fulfill, a role to play. But ultimately, the Jewish home is what sustains us. And that's the point that I was making. When Yitzchak saw this, he knew she's the one. So, let's get to work.